to action. Again, my name is Kish Richardson. I'm currently a senior at the University of Cincinnati. I'm studying cognitive philosophy and international affairs. I also have the humble privilege of serving as a co-founder of the Black Roundtable, an organization you'll learn a little bit more about later today. I am joined by Dr. Lamkin, a professor at UC. Dr. Lamkin will speak from the faculty staff side of our organizing efforts, and I will speak from the student side.
So as we're getting started, I want to make sure that everyone is aware of the 4 documents posted in the chat. The links are in the chat. And I just want to say a little bit about them. So these documents are the backbone of our organizing efforts, with the first 2 reflecting the faculty staff side of our organizing, and the second 2 reflecting the student side. The first document is a pledge to dismantle white supremacy within ourselves and our institutions. It is directed toward white faculty and staff, but open to all UC employees. Because confronting systemic racism as a member of the dominant majority demands self-examination, the staff faculty side of our organizing effort begins with the pledge. It's a flexible pledge that allows signers to select the items they agree with and pledge to do. If they indicate interest in organizing on campus, I invite them to join the coalition. Currently, about 150 UC personnel have signed the pledge and joined the coalition. The second document is a near final draft of our strategic plan.
The last 2 documents are formalized demands put forward by the Black Roundtable and our undergraduate student government. These are student groups who inspire and inform the work of the coalition. We will reference these documents, but again, we will not review them in detail. We're providing them for your reference. But how did we get here to this stage of our organizing effort, and where are we going? To answer these questions, we will first share our individual perspectives and approach to organizing. Then we will facilitate a discussion where we will invite you to ask questions and share your own perspectives, interests, and efforts. Dr. Lamkin will get us started by sharing her perspective.
Thank you, Kish. I'm going to orient my perspective through the lens of 10th grade me. It was 1989. My family had just moved from a Black-white integrated working class neighborhood to a suburb built to accommodate the next wave of white flight. My new school was a sea of whiteness. On the surface, it was safe, polite, and orderly, but there was an undercurrent of anti-Black racism. It was quiet, it was jokey and hard to discern. It simultaneously existed and did not exist. I was used to a more race-in-your-face environment, which wasn't easy, given the frequency of traumatic interactions that went unresolved. I wrote about these contrasting environments in an English essay I called Closeted Racism. I got an A, but it was never discussed. For 30 years, in predominantly white spaces I occupied, it was never discussed. In 2010, I started a PhD in biology at UC. Given the urban location, I expected to encounter a diverse faculty and student body. I did not. I learned the phrase predominantly white institution, or PWI, and that this was normal, even for institutions located in predominantly Black communities. At the beginning of my time at UC police fatally tased Kelly Brinson and Everett Howard, both Black men perceived to be threatening. I was unaware that it happened. No one in my spaces talked about it. In 2013, a professor made a racist cartoon depicting 2 Black administrators and circulated it around campus. I heard about it, but it wasn't discussed. Not in my spaces anyway. If you'd like to learn more, I recommend Dean Carol Tong Mack's memoir, Being Bernadette, From Polite Silence to Finding the Black Girl Magic Within. She discusses the incident as she experienced it. In 2015, as I was focused on graduating, people with cell phones were increasingly revealing the breadth and depth of anti-Black racism and police brutality across the nation. In July of that year, UC police fatally shot Samuel DuBose, who had been pulled over for driving without a front license plate. I heard about it, but in my spaces, it wasn't discussed. In my spaces, we talked about science. Elsewhere on campus, a student activist group called the Irate Eight formed, and they demanded UC do better. They presented a list of demands to UC's president and produced a video to help more people understand what it's like to be Black at UC. I encourage you to watch it. It's powerful. After I graduated, UC hired me to broaden participation in undergraduate research. Prompted by my new role, I embarked on a journey to understand what limits participation. And I learned that systemic racism, or the policies and practices that disproportionately exclude, harm, or hinder the success of racialized minorities, especially Black people, plays a major role in who enters research and who advances in research roles. Entry into research often begins at the undergraduate level. In the United States, there's an approximate 200-year culture of professors accepting undergraduate students for career-forwarding, mentored research experiences. These experiences prepare students for graduate school and beyond. But as my ivory tower cartoon suggests, it was, and still can be, hard to get such an opportunity without a degree of social capital enjoyed by a narrow few. Efforts to, quote, broaden participation in research or make access to opportunity more equitable have been relatively recent. MIT, they launched the nation's first program to broaden participation. It was 1969, just 5 years after the Civil Rights Act passed. And for 20 years, this program would be the only. Federal funding in the 1980s incentivized universities across the country to develop programs like the one at MIT. By the mid-1990s, these broadening participation programs were considered a national trend. And although these efforts advanced the proportion of white women in research roles considerably over the years, Black, Latinx, and Indigenous remain, quote, woefully underrepresented in research. Because of policies and practices that disproportionately exclude, harm, or hinder the success of racialized minorities, especially Black people. On one of those early days on the job, I was developing my understanding of things, I ran into Dean Mack. She gave a big friendly wave like she does. And I noticed the shirt under her blazer said, "In polite silence." And those words hit me in a funny, all over kind of way. It made me aware of my own polite silence over the last 30 years. Meanwhile, across the country, the injustice was becoming increasingly visible and intolerable. And then it became too much to bear. And a nation took to the streets. And I made a sign that said, "Silence is violence." And I joined them. And my next door neighbor, Cliff, he wanted to talk to me about that. He caught me outside after a day of protesting and asked if he could speak to me for a minute. He wanted to know my purpose in taking to the streets. After I responded, he looked at me hard and said, "Megan, you didn't get that degree for nothing." and he implored me to take to the pen. You see, Cliff watched me sweat for 6 years working on a PhD, and he knew better than I that those 3 letters provided me a degree of influence I hadn't realized. But what would I write? And who would care? Not long after that, I got an email from a colleague asking me and another colleague if we, as co-chairs of our division's Equity and Inclusion Committee, had thought about writing a statement in response to the uprisings. Without this prompt, I would not have realized that this was a role through which I could take to the pen. Is there a role through which you could take to the pen? What came out of me was a pledge to dismantle white supremacy within ourselves and our institutions. Inspired by reflection I had been doing using the Me and White Supremacy workbook by Layla Saad. My department was not comfortable using that language for their statement, but they encouraged me to develop it further. So I started reaching out to various groups that you see for insight and guidance. Black and other colleagues of color were consistently encouraging. When I shared a draft with Dean Mack, she gave me some feedback, and then she said, let me ask you something. Is this a moment or a movement? So people sign a pledge, then what? And although I wasn't sure I was prepared or equipped to organize signers and lead a movement, I know there was only one answer, and it had to be a movement to support the movement that Black colleagues and students have been leading all along. So on the pledge, I included an option for people to express interest in organizing on campus. After I got about 70 yeses, I called a meeting. These early adopters developed a name and agreed that our work needed to be, continue to be inspired and guided by the Black activists who have been doing the work all along. And with that, it is my pleasure to hand it over to Kish Richardson, an extraordinary leader for social change who inspires me, and I'm sure he'll inspire you as he shares his perspective and approach to organizing.
Thank you, Dr. Lamkin, for not only sharing your perspective, but truly being vulnerable in this movement to address systemic racism at UC. As a student, as a Black student at a predominantly white institution, I've come to understand the different barriers and obstacles one can face while doing this work. Again, I am a senior at UC, but my collegiate identity is only just one small part of who I am. I've lived my entire life in Cincinnati, growing up in different inner city neighborhoods, but as a result of these experiences, I've always had the ideal of making the world a better place. So this activist spirit inspired me to continue my involvement at UC through student government, the United Black Student Association, and currently the Black Roundtable. So consequently, as I furthered my involvement within the various facets of UC, I became more familiar with the bureaucracy and politics innate to institutions of higher education. For example, the Irate Eight did a phenomenal job of bringing attention to the history of Black injustice at UC. From the MLK trash parties in the 1980s, to a formal request for all Black organizations to be abolished, to naming buildings after openly racist donors. But they made impressive progress on multiple demands in 2015, including the development of a racial awareness program and the implementation of a diversity council on student government. Nonetheless, many injustices remain. To this day, the University of Cincinnati Police Department continues to employ both Philip Kidd and David Lindenschmidt, the 2 officers complicit in the death of Samuel DuBose in 2015. Understanding UC's history of accommodating policies and practices that threaten the physical and psychological safety of Black Bearcats compels me and so many others to keep going, for this is truly a movement. And always believed that it is incumbent upon those with the means and the privilege to make the world a better place. So when I became aware of an initiative on behalf of our university police department that involved 24/7 armed patrols in residence halls, I pursued conversations with both UCPD and our resident education department. I learned from them that UCPD deemed this initiative best practices for engaging and connecting with the UC community. Not only was there no community engagement in developing this plan, but this is the same department responsible for the deaths of 4 unarmed, innocent Black men from 1997 to Lorenzo Collins, to 2010, Kelly Brinson, 2011, Everett Howard, to 2015, Samuel DuBose. Furthermore, the officer complicit in 2 of the deaths would be among those patrolling our halls. This felt like a blatant disregard for the feelings and experiences of a community that had been historically traumatized by UCPD. So we invited the chief of UCPD to a Black Roundtable meeting to hear the students' perspectives. The outcome of that meeting was a community resident engagement plan developed collaboratively by students, the Department of Public Safety, and our resident education department. Through centering the people that are disproportionately impacted by these initiatives, we can continue to develop innovative and intentional ideas. But what is the Black Roundtable? The Black Roundtable is an organization that convenes leaders in Black-oriented organizations across the university as a way of communicating and sharing ideas. I can't overemphasize the diversity of identities and cultures that exist within the Black community, both within the world and at UC. And that diversity is reflected by the more than 20 Black-based organizations at UC, such as those named on this slide, our Black Student Athlete Association, our African Student Association, and so many more. So several of us established the Black Roundtable to connect these groups that would otherwise be working in isolation. Is there a role through which you can connect people working in isolation? In the summer of 2020, we issued a set of 10 demands to UC President and the Board of Trustees. These demands culminated from conversations with professors, administrators, and even members of President Pinto's cabinet. One of our demands is to implement diversity and inclusion metrics in all faculty performance reviews. This is to ensure a degree of cultural competence in serving students of all identities. Many professors refuse to develop diversity and inclusion skills. They don't see the value in it. But there are still professors who are so culturally incompetent that they fail to acknowledge religious observances or holidays. How can we expect students to succeed in the classroom when they are denied the ability to express their culture? Another demand is to implement contractual amendments to our UCPD collective bargaining agreements. In advancing the work and legacy of the IRATE 8, we found it imperative to continue to promote police accountability. Implementing these amendments ensure that our officers are held to the highest standards. This demand has deep personal meaning. It essentially says that UC should agree not to hire candidates who have been discharged or resigned following criminal or administrative determinations that they've engaged in acts of dishonesty, excessive force, or racial profiling at a previous agency. In addition to advocating for change at UC, the Black Roundtable has been in conversations with the Black student associations at the 14 public universities in Ohio to establish the Ohio Black Student Association. Through collaboratively developing a legislative agenda for the advancement of Black students throughout Ohio, we hope to amplify the work being done on our respective campuses. In closing, I would like to acknowledge the students who have been doing this work since the work could be done. From UC's Quadrates, founded in 1934 with the goal of inspiring racial harmony and integration on campus, to the IRATE 8, and now the Black Roundtable. The movement continues. And with the predominantly white faculty and staff coalition joining us, and the Black faculty and staff who have supported us all along, I am hopeful that we will live to see meaningful change. I've had the privilege of working with pioneers for social and racial justice, so I can attest to the lack of accolades one might expect in doing this work. It is thankless, it is hard, but it is necessary. And no one person or organization can do it alone. So while students may serve as the shock troops for advocating for change on campus, we truly need the faculty and staff to advocate with us. Thank you again for being here and to learn about these efforts.
Thank you, Kish, for your perspective and your dedication to community and our university. As a final note, I'm going to explain our collaborative approach to organizing. First, the coalition prioritizes listening and asking how we can help. We're not here to take over. We're here to support. As you can see in the strategic plan, our mission emphasizes self-examination and becoming better allies, helping our colleagues do the same, and at the same time advocating policies and practices that support racial equity. Action items for our first 2 years are focused on relationship building, developing actionable items with strategic partners, and making progress on action items through committee work. As Kish stated, it will only work if we are united in our efforts and in it for the long haul. And with that, we would like to open it up for discussion. We're interested in what questions you might have, and we're also interested in what perspectives you would like to share, especially regarding your interest and effort in organizing at your institution. If you're organizing at UC and we don't know about it, we certainly want to know about that. Please put your comments in the chat and we will respond to them. I'm going to stop sharing the slides now so I can see more people. I said I was, but we'll see. You guys can start putting stuff in the chat and I'll figure out how to stop sharing slides. Michael, can you make me stop sharing slides?
Megan, I'm looking for that now. As soon as I can, I'll let you know. In the meantime, participants, please go ahead and start chatting away, asking questions or providing some commentary.
I can't see a thing.
All right, Megan and Kish, we have a question here from Kim. She thanks you, by the way. As a former Bearcat, how are you thinking about engaging alums in this work?
Kish, you go ahead.
Well, obviously, as a student, we rely on alumni for a number of things outside of financial reasons. The Black community has an alumni association known as UC4A, the African American Alumni Affiliate. And again, these are people who have experienced these same issues and have these same grievances. So as we connect with them and build these relations to understand how they navigated these spaces, they can be more than insightful and be more than just mentors. There are people in administrative positions who work in other institutions who are in diversity and inclusion offices. So as we continue to see the work they do in their respective campuses, we try to bring back that conversation and the things that we learned back to UC. So I think finding those people who continue to do this work outside of UC and within their own communities, they have been instrumental in the conversations that we've taken place in the past year. Outside of alumni, previous administrators or faculty have helped develop the demands that we've sent to administrators. So I do think establishing the connections and relationships that may have existed previously is one way that we can continue to work within our own communities.
And for the staff faculty side, I'll just say, to be honest, we're not quite there yet. So we're open to suggestions. Our draft strategic plan has not even been finalized yet. So that's kind of how new we are. So the work is just beginning. And right now we are so limited in being able to share these documents within UC. We've experienced a good bit of opposition. So it's been difficult to circulate the pledge and encourage people to participate. So maybe if there's a way for alumni to help us with that, that would be amazing. We're trying to become one of our goals. We have an email out. We're requesting to meet with someone from the president's office to be officially recognized as a UC organization, so that we can get some support. For example, we have consultants from the Black faculty and staff who are guiding the predominantly white coalition. It would be amazing if we could pay them a stipend. We could really use some web support and some social media support, stuff like that. Right now, a lot of people don't know what we're doing or that we exist.
Megan, you have another question here, Megan and Kish, from Allison. What has, and you sort of answered this a little bit, but what has the response been from UC administration to some of these demands?
Well, in regards to the Black Roundtables, as I mentioned, these came from a culmination of conversations with both administrators and members within President Pinto's cabinet. So we came into these conversations thinking that these were more than feasible. As we continue to discuss the feasibility, we understood the different initiatives that were in place to achieve the type of change we were hoping to accomplish. That is not to say that we haven't been able to make substantive developments. Again, we were able to implement contractual amendments, basically ensuring that our officers aren't allowed to get away with acts of dishonesty or excessive force. One would think that this is commonplace or common sense, but until you analyze the policies and standards that we are holding these people to, there unfortunately won't be mechanisms to hold them accountable. So again, we have been able to make substantive developments within regards to our demands. I'm trying to think of some that we have, as far as representation, one of our demands was having the Black Roundtable Senator on our Community Compliance Council, and that's essentially the entity that deals with police accountability and just police conduct and successful. We were successful in the sense that it was accomplished a couple of years ago. We just hadn't had knowledge of that. And then we also requested to have a seat on our president's cabinet. But unfortunately, there's a student representative who serves in that position already. But again, we have made more than substantive developments. And this is not to say that this is just a first step. We are not expecting to make systemic change overnight or within 1 year. So as we continue to have these conversations and create sustainable solutions, I'm hopeful for what's to come.
From the faculty staff perspective, I'll say that during the previous presidential administration, there was a serious threat to admitting systemic racism existed at your institution. Princeton was one university that was sued by the Federal Department of Education because their president openly signed a letter like, we know systemic racism exists here. And so then they were sued for taking Title IX money while being racist. I don't know what came of that, but now that there's a new administration, that threat appears to be gone. And so we're trying to have these meetings to get official recognition and more support for these initiatives.
Kish and Megan, you have a question here from Keisha wanting to know, of those that have signed the pledge, faculty, staff, and perhaps others, do you know if any of those folks are going back into their respective units and their respective networks, and are they doing anything to make changes, policy-wise, procedural-wise, within their own spaces?
So we are aware of action in a few different spaces in the university, like the College of Allied Health and Engineering, where they're starting to look at course curriculum and ask, where is there an opportunity for a more inclusive curriculum? So we know things are happening, and but it's, so yes, so the short answer is yes, things are definitely happening. There are a lot of reading groups, there's a lot of self-examination happening in lots of different spaces. There are community discussions. I I would say yes, there's a lot of activity. And what we would like to do is connect all of those people in isolation somehow to leverage collective voice for more, sort of more teeth in what's happening. Like Kish mentioned, one of their demands is to have equity and inclusion included on faculty performance review. So, because of our union that protects us, administration can't just say, oh, we're going to put this new metric on you. So what we need are a critical mass of the predominantly white faculty to say, we want to push this. We want that in our review because we want to be held accountable and we want our institution to be accountable for our behaviors and actions in the classroom. So that's where we're at. That's what we're trying to do.
Thank you, Dr. Lamkin. We have about 5 minutes left for questions. So folks, please feel free to post those.
A question of people out there. Is anyone out there organizing? Can you share with us what you're doing at your institution? Or if you're doing something that you see that you don't know about, that we don't know about, can you share it with us? Maybe a hand raise if it's too much to type. Oh, I see.
I'll be brave. So the opposition is real. That's all I will say. So I work at Northern Kentucky University, and there's some folks' names I recognize. And I am a newly minted member of Staff Congress. And so we had attempted to create a resolution that has just stalemated around Black Lives Matter. I mean, so far it's just been kind of discouraging getting anonymous emails, kind of people going, we don't need to do that. It's just been really quite disheartening. And so, I think I'm kind of coming back to my own space. So yesterday I kind of voiced my concerns to the exec committee of my staff Congress and just said, hey, the work's got to be done. And if it's not going to be done at the top right now, I'm going to try to do what I can at the middle, at the bottom. And that looked like reaching out to my director and saying, let's review policies and procedures. I think that's something we need to do, in the coming weeks as we are building our staff, to kind of just make sure there is nothing in what we do that is creating barriers that are based on white supremacy. So that's kind of what we're doing, and the push is still there. Some things just happened recently at NKU with some white supremacy group coming on campus and putting stickers up. And so the students are rightfully angry because there has not been a lot of, it just feels like, to quote some students recently at SGA, lip service. They want action. So I think your documents are beautiful. Like, they're great. I love all.
You can just replace.
Okay. No, I just really like it. Part of me is like, I want to connect somebody with Kish too from the student side here at NK, because this is just really it's good to see. It's nice to see. So that's all I will say.
Thank you, Keisha. Is there anyone else who has something from their space, their institution to share in terms of organizing? Mike, I don't see anybody, but you might see things I don't.
We have Elaine saying that they're trying to get things included in syllabi, but there are some resistant faculty members. She also goes on to say that the process is long and drawn out, it seems, but I think you both are experiencing that. So we have about one minute to go, and I was hoping I could ask one final question. If your work is successful, where would you like to see this in 10 years?
Go ahead, Kish.
I can't say there's any one unilateral blueprint to success. Like, there is no definitive idea as to what is right. But as we continue to have these conversations and strive toward that more just point, I think continuing the conversations and creating these sustainable solutions is enough for me at the time. I do think we're doing the work. It's not easy, but as long as we continue to commit to the work, I think that's better than what we've been doing in the past. And then Dr. Lamkin, please.
I would like to see classes across disciplines incorporating the racial histories of their disciplines into all of their coursework. So it's not just people majoring in sociology that get an education in racial disparities. I would like to not be the dominant